Korea posted the lowest economic growth among 19 major economies in the first quarter amid a domestic political crisis and uncertainties due to the Trump administration's sweeping tariff policies.
국내 정치 위기 및 미국 트럼프 행정부의 전면 관세 정책으로 인한 불확실성이 지속되는 가운데 올해 우리나라 1분기 경제 성장률이 지금까지 수치가 발표된 주요 19개국 가운데 가장 낮은 것으로 나타났습니다. Tell us more.
Yeah, so they're saying that among the 19 major economies, Korea had the smallest or the worst growth, and it wasn't actually even growth. It was regression.
Right.
It actually shrank by 0.246% from the period that goes January to March. So certainly not a good thing because it's actually regressing.
Yep.
In comparison, Ireland recorded the highest growth rate at 3.219%. And that's a bit of an anomaly because the second highest growth rate was 1.2% by China. So Ireland at 3.2, that was like more than double every other nation during that period.
You mentioned an anomaly there, but we have been seeing reports of Ireland's economy doing quite well, and a lot of news reports say that, exactly, that it is unusual, I suppose.
Yeah, something strange or something that people didn't see coming.
Exactly. Well, Korea has been posting minus growth. So, I mean, when you hear the word growth, you assume it's a plus, but it's actually not in this case.
Negative growth.
That's right. What's a major economy, Jason?
The major economy are the biggest economies in the world. So we're talking about the U.S. and, among them, obviously, Korea as well, a lot of the Asian countries that are basically have the biggest gross domestic product. They're, making the most traditionally.
So they're actually countries.
Yes.
So economy here not only refers to the economy, but the actual country.
The economies of the countries is specifically what it's referring to.
Right. 그래서 주요 국가, 주요 경제 국가인데 그냥 우리는 주요국이라고 하죠. 영어로는 major economies.
Yeah, and anytime you think of major, you're thinking of something that's bigger than the norm. And of course, minor would be the opposite, where it's smaller.
Exactly. And what about uncertainties?
Uncertainties are things that, it's lack of certainty, right?
Yeah.
So when you don't have certainty. So when you're unsure about what's to come. And a lot of people, when it comes to the economy and things like that, they want to know. They want to know if something is supposed to get better or worse. But when there's that uncertainty or when there's that lack of knowledge of whether it's going to go one direction or the other, then people tend to not want to invest in that country, which is why the economy has shrunk.
Absolutely. It's what investors hate.
Yes, exactly.
네, 불확실성을 uncertainty라고 하고요. 복수 형태 uncertainties가 여기선 쓰였네요. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. Korea posted the lowest economic growth among 19 major economies in the first quarter, amid a domestic political crisis and uncertainties due to the Trump administration's sweeping tariff policies. Now let's move on to the second headline.
Pope Leo XIV, during his first Mass as pontiff, expressed his hope to lead a Roman Catholic Church that illuminates the dark nights of this world, following his surprise election as the first U.S. Pope in a conclave that lasted less than 26 hours, one of the shortest in modern Catholic history.
26시간이 채 되지 않은 가톨릭 역사상 가장 짧은 콘클라베를 통해 사상 첫 미국인 교황으로 깜짝 선출된 교황 레오 14세가 첫 미사를 집전했습니다. 이 자리에서 교황은 이 세상의 어두운 밤을 밝히는 로마 가톨릭 교회를 이끌겠다는 희망을 밝혔습니다. His real name is Bob. Robert. He's from Chicago, I think. And he's the first American-born Pope. So tell us more.
Yeah, he's 69 years of age. This was one of the shortest votes necessary, only going up to just over 24 hours, so about 26 hours that they're saying. And as he takes over, he's now the leader of the Catholic world, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that what pontiff means?
Yeah, pontiff is essentially just another word for pope. And a pope, of course, is the head of the Catholic Church. So it's the highest person. You often see the pope in the news in various different ways, the different popes that we've had over the years, especially more recently, we've had a lot of different popes. Like I remember in the 80s when I think his name was John Paul II or the third, something like that. I remember him being pope for a very long period of time. So if we look at modern history over the last decade or so, to have, I think, 3 in the last 10 or 15 years, it just, there's a lot of change as to what I remember as a kid.
그래요. pontiff가 스펠링이 어떻게 되나요, 선생님?
Pontiff.
이게 또 pope의 또 다른 말이라고 합니다. 교황이 되겠죠. P-O-P-E, pope, and pontiff. Now, to illuminate is an interesting verb.
Yeah, I love this word.
Yeah.
So it can just be used as light up, right? You're talking about light or bringing light into darkness, right? To light up a room. You illuminate the room.
Sure.
But just the sound of it, it sounds so much more sophisticated than just lighting up a room, you know, to illuminate the room, to bring lightness in so you can see everything. I think it just sounds a lot, more intelligent and more sophisticated.
그래요. 빛을 비춘다라는 뜻인데 단순히 사실 우리가 빛을 비춘다라고 할 때는 영어 동사 to light 이걸 써도 되는데 조금 더 강조하는 느낌도 있고 조금 더 밝게 비춘다는 느낌까지도 있는 것 같아요. illuminate라는 것은 원래 이제 형광등으로 킨다 아니면 형광펜으로 뭔가 이렇게 하이라이팅을 한다가 될 수도 있고 이 경우에는 뭐 세상의 빛을 밝히겠다 이런 의미로 쓴 것 같네요.
Yeah, I remember there was a movie in the 90s called Demolition Man with Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes. And there was a scene where back then, it's a futuristic movie, and somebody would come in and say, lights on. And the light didn't turn on, and because Wesley Snipes actually changed the password. And he said, I changed your word, so it's no longer lights on, it's illuminate.
Oh, okay.
And so like there was just kind
Perfect.
of that, it made it even feel better. It's like, it's a much better word than just lights on.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm sure movie fans will be familiar with the word conclave. I mean, if you're Catholic, you're obviously going to be familiar with it. But elsewhere around the world, this movie quite fittingly came out just a few months ago. And it is all about the voting process and of how the Pope is selected. And I learned a thing or two by watching this movie as well. And this time around, they had a very short conclave, only 26 hours. So
Yes.
very short. You have to, I think, have more than 2/3 of the votes of all of the priests and the higher
Cardinals.
Cardinals there, and you keep going until you get 2/3 of the vote, and this can last for a very long time.
Yes, it can.
Yeah, but this time I guess a lot of people just agreed right out of the bat, so that's good. And of course, Roman numerals, it's hard to get used to at first, but X stands for 10, and then V stands for 5. So if you have an I before the V, it's 5 minus
It's
1.
minus,
If
exactly.
it's V1, or VI, sorry, then it's 5
6.
plus 1, so
Yes.
it's 6. All right, so this time, of course, we have Leo the 14th. You always have the, right?
Yes.
Leo,
Yeah, it's not just Leo 14.
That's right, yeah. So right now we have, in England, King Charles III.
Yes.
And before that it was Queen Elizabeth II. All right, I'm going to read the headline one more time. Pope Leo XIV, during his first Mass as pontiff, expressed his hope to lead a Roman Catholic Church that illuminates the dark nights of this world, following his surprise election as the first U.S. Pope in a conclave that lasted less than 26 hours, one of the shortest in modern Catholic history.
India and Pakistan have abruptly declared a ceasefire after 4 days of escalating drone volleys, shelling, and airstrikes that brought the old enemies to the brink of outright war.
인도와 파키스탄이 갈수록 격화한 드론 공습과 포격, 또 공습을 4일간 주고받으며 전면전 직전까지 치달은 끝에 극적으로 휴전에 합의했습니다. 여기 한글에 보면 공습이 2번 나와서 조금 헷갈리실 수도 있는데요. 뭐 드론 공격 이렇게 표현을 해도 될 것 같고 앞에 있는 표현과 뒤에 있는 표현을 잠시 후에 더 보겠습니다. First of all, tell us what's happening.
Yeah, so of course there's been a lot of terrorist attacks and, different shellings and drone volleys that have been taking place over the past week plus. And the strangest thing that people are saying is the news of this was actually broken by President Donald Trump on social media. Apparently, he was the first to say, hey, there's going to be a ceasefire from both sides. And the Pakistani side actually acknowledged that, saying, this was the U.S. had a little bit of intervention in here, whereas the Indian side actually did not mention the United States in their official declaration of the ceasefire.
Right. Well, the conflict around the Kashmir border has been going on for quite some time. But as you said, I guess it's in the interest of the US as well to either step in or to mediate, or we don't know exactly. But everything happened abruptly.
Yes, and when something happens abruptly, it happens suddenly without notice. So people didn't see this coming. It maybe wasn't predicted. It was kind of surprising to people when it actually happened. So it happened suddenly and very quickly without the build-up to something where people say, oh, okay, I guess this is going to happen because you can see the build-up. But when it just suddenly happens abruptly, then you don't see it coming.
네, 불쑥 이런 의미가 있어요. Suddenly랑 abruptly가 굉장히 비슷한데 갑자기라는 의미. Abruptly가 조금 더 불쑥 뭔가 일어나는 느낌. 어떻게 설명하기가 좀 어려운데 suddenly하고 abruptly가 아주 미묘하게 차이가 있긴 있거든요.
Yeah,
그렇죠? 네.
I'd say I think abruptly, I think of being a little bit less predictable.
Okay.
Not like somebody stood up abruptly because you didn't think that they were going to, but they abruptly stood up and left the room.
Yeah.
Whereas, I mean, you can use it as suddenly, but I would think that abruptly would be more appropriate in that situation.
And I also think there's a slight negative connotation with abruptly.
Yeah, I
so
think
like
so.
you say, you abruptly interrupt someone or you abruptly leave the room. You don't abruptly cry. It's like, so I think suddenly is more neutral.
Yeah, more broad as well,
Yeah.
I would think. Like abruptly, I think, does seem a little bit more specific to certain situations, where suddenly, I think, seems a little bit more broadly used.
그렇죠. 그래서 불쑥 뭐뭐 한다 이런 느낌으로 이제 좀 무례하거나 아니면은 좀 부정적인 뉘앙스가 있다 이해하시면 될 것 같아요. 전반적으로 봤을 때는 비슷하지만 suddenly와 abruptly가 이런 미묘한 차이가 있습니다. abruptly의 스펠링은 A-B-R-U-P-T-L-Y. Now, what's volley doing here? It's not a volleyball, is it?
No, not a volleyball. So it says drone volleys.
Drone volleys.
So what's that saying is it's not just one drone, but it's a bunch of drones. So anytime you have a bunch of things in the air at the same time, then you can call it a volley of these. So, like there was a Korean weapon back in the old days that shot out arrows with like rockets attached to them, like hundreds of years ago. I remember it being called a hwacha. I think there's other names for it as well, depending on the era. But that could, shoot a volley of arrows into the air at the same time. If you were to shoot one gun, like a pistol, then it might just shoot one bullet. If you have a machine gun, then it would shoot a volley of bullets. So it's when you have multiple projectiles in the air at the same time.
Multiple projectiles. 이게 포인트네요. 그래서 drone volleys라는 것도 역시 굉장히 많은 드론을 일제히 사격으로 사용했다 이렇게 보시면 될 것 같습니다. 그래서 뭐 드론 공격이라고 할 수 있겠네요. Drone volleys.
And you did mention volleyball, but we actually do use this quite a bit in sports, in soccer, as an example. So a volley would be a shot that you would take, or when you kick the ball before the ball touches the ground. So if the ball's in the air and you kick it, then we would call that like a volley or a volley shot. Also in tennis, there's something called the volley, serve and volley technique. And same thing in tennis, if you hit the ball before it bounces, because usually in tennis you have one bounce and then you have to hit the ball, second bounce, and then it's a point. But if you hit the ball before the ball touches the ground for the first bounce, then that would be called a volley shot as well.
volley, 테니스하고 축구에서도 그렇게 쓰이는군요. 네, V-O-L-L-E-Y. 다시 한번 제가 헤드라인 읽어보겠습니다. India and Pakistan have abruptly declared a ceasefire after 4 days of escalating drone volleys, shelling, and airstrikes that brought the old enemies to the brink of outright war. Let's move on to the next headline.
The European Union and the United Kingdom are set to hold annual summits to assess their bilateral relationship, according to a draft statement prepared for the first London-Brussels summit since Brexit, scheduled to take place in the British capital on May 19th.
유럽연합과 영국이 연례 정상회담을 갖고 양국 관계 재설정을 위한 논의에 들어간다는 사실이 현재 준비 중인 성명 초안을 통해 밝혀졌습니다. 브렉시트 이후 양측 사이의 첫 회동이 될 이번 회담은 영국 런던에서 오는 5월 19일에 열릴 예정입니다. And the reason we have the London-Brussels summit is because London symbolizes the UK and Brussels symbolizes the EU. All right, so tell us more.
Yeah, so they've drafted outlines for the two sides to basically, check on each other and their status. But they're also kind of saying, look, we want to maintain a relationship. I mean, we know that you're not part of the EU anymore, referring to England. But at the same time, let's make sure that, we see eye to eye on issues. And one of the priorities does include their continued support for the Ukraine in the conflict there against Russia. And they want to, they're talking about keeping the pressure on Russia as a team, sort of like to stay on the same page.
It's been 5 years since the UK officially left the EU, so I guess it's high time for them to assess the situation.
Yeah, and if you're assessing something, then you're kind of checking on your status, or you're kind of, re-evaluating the situation. So you're going to look at the situation and say, okay, well, how are things going? How are we doing? Are we improving? Are we not? You can assess a lot of different things. You can assess your businesses, the economics of it, the accounting. You're basically just kind of analyzing or looking over things.
그렇죠. ASS, ESS. S가 4개나 들어갑니다. 근데 지금 이게 assess라는 원형이어서 그렇고요. If you were to say he or she, then you would have some more S's there because he assesses.
Yes.
You add an ES at the end. 자, 어쨌든 무언가 평가한다는 뜻이죠. 그래서 지난 5년간 EU를 떠난 영국과 나머지 이제 EU 간의 그런 무역 관계, 외교 관계, 다양한 것들을 평가해 볼 수 있는 그런 시간을 정상회담을 통해서 가지려고 하는 건데요. To assess. That's why we have assessments in English as well. What about scheduled to take place?
Well, if you're scheduling something, then you're making a promise of some sort saying, let's do this at this time and place. Now, if we say to take place, to take place here is we're talking about something that's happening.
Sure.
So you might say, when is it happening? Where is it happening? Where is it taking place? When is it taking place?
Scheduled to do something means it is going to happen. It's written down somewhere. It's planned. 그래서 scheduled to take place는 일어날 예정이다라는 뜻이 되겠죠. There's a different pronunciation for the word schedule in the UK, and I hardly use it anymore, but it's schedule.
I have heard that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I think now that I've lived in Korea for decades, and everyone says schedule all the time in Korean, it feels awkward for me to say schedule.
Yeah. And
I
then you get the American side of it as well.
I hardly ever hear it. So I've heard many Brits in Korea also say schedule. Both pronunciations are fine. 자, 그래서 언제 일어날 예정이다. It is scheduled to take place. 다시 읽어보겠습니다. The European Union and the UK are set to hold annual summits to assess their bilateral relationship, according to a draft statement prepared for the first London-Brussels summit since Brexit, scheduled to take place in the British capital on May 19th. Let's move on to the final headline.
A new study finds that when prepared properly, potatoes can support weight loss and blood sugar control, making them a satisfying and nutrient-rich addition to a healthy diet.
감자를 제대로 조리하면 체중 감량과 혈당 조절에 도움이 되어 포만감을 주고 영양이 풍부한 식사로서 이를 건강한 식단에 추가할 수 있다는 새로운 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. I think the important point here is when prepared properly. So I guess French fries, not so much.
Exactly.
Okay.
You know, I was going to say the exact same
really?
thing.
Okay.
Because the last thing I want is my kids to hear this news and go, yay,
Hey,
French fries!
breakfast, lunch, and dinner. No. Tell us more.
Absolutely. So when prepared properly, and usually when they say this, they're talking about if it's boiled and then cooled for 24 hours, then at that point, with their skin on as well, by the way, to keep some of the nutrients that's part of the skin of the potato, then those can be quite healthy for you. Potatoes, they say they're low in energy density. And what that means is the amount of energy that you get compared to the weight of what you're eating. So
that's good.
in terms of they're heavy, but they actually don't provide that much energy, meaning, excess energy that you don't need when you're eating it, but you'll still feel satisfied because of, the actual amount that you're eating.
I love potatoes, but I feel like potatoes do get a bad rap most of the time. It's sort of like they make you fat, and they're not good for you. But no, if you prepare them, like you said, if you boil them and then leave them out for 24 hours, I guess they're great. So
I think the issue is the most common way to eat potatoes is usually with, cheese, or to have a deep fried, or it's like it's just there's so many other ways. Or I remember in Korea as a kid dipping them in sugar as well, like boiled potatoes or with butter and things like that. So you're eating it with unhealthy things, and I think that might give it a bad rap. Whereas let's say rice is supposed to be good for you, but if you're having risotto all the time with cheese and cream, then that's probably not going to be good either.
그렇군요. 푹 삶은 다음에 식혀서 먹으면은 괜찮다고 합니다. 통감자는 어떨까요? 그건 약간의 통감자.
Yeah, baked potato. I would.
우리 휴게소에서 파는 거 있잖아요. 그거 아세요? 작은 거.
Yes.
그 작은 알감자라 그러나 통감자라 그러나.
Yeah, I think they're usually dipped in butter. They've been sitting in butter of some sort.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit oily.
Yeah. But at the same time, butter's gotten a bad rap over the years. I think it depends on how much butter you have on it as well.
Butter's not bad for you.
Exactly.
Though. Exactly. 자, 그래요. Get a bad rap라는 표현도 지금 여러 번 언급을 했는데 좀 평판이 안 좋다. 아니면은 좀 나쁘다라는 인식이 있다.
Bad image.
맞아요. 그런 의미인데 그런 거에 비해서 사실 감자가 그렇게 몸에 나쁜 건 아닙니다. 어떻게 조리를 하느냐에 따라 다른 거겠죠? 여기 한번 표현을 볼게요. It's very satisfying.
Yeah, something that is satisfying makes you feel good or makes you feel content. You might ask, are you satisfied with that? Are you happy with that?
Sure.
Are you glad that, you're maybe paid for the service? Are you happy or satisfied with the service that you received compared to how much you paid?
Yep. 만족스럽다. Something is satisfying. And when it comes to food, 포만감을 준다. 그런 의미고요. And in addition to something?
Yeah, in addition, you think of the math term, like we add to something, or if you're using mathematics, you add or you subtract, or in addition, then you're adding. So it's added to a healthy diet. So if you have a healthy diet, you can add potatoes and you'll be fine. It's not going to ruin your diet ruin your healthy diet if you add potatoes to it.
Right. Here, though, I just noticed it's an addition to, which is similar to in addition to, but the grammar is slightly different. If you say A in addition to B, then you're saying A and B. But in this case, we are saying it's an addition to a healthy diet. So potatoes are a great addition to a healthy diet. 네, 우리가 이제 건강한 식단에 이제 추가로 먹을 수 있는 것 중에 하나가 감자다. 그래서 명사 addition이 쓰였습니다. 다시 한번 읽어볼게요. A new study finds that when prepared properly, potatoes can support weight loss and blood sugar control, making them a satisfying and nutrient-rich addition to a healthy diet. Well, that's it for the headlines with Jason Lee.
Nuclear power overtook coal last year to become Korea's largest source of electricity for the first time, accounting for more than 31% of total electricity generation.
지난해 국내 발전 부문에서 원자력이 전체 발전량의 31% 이상을 차지하면서 처음으로 석탄을 제치고 최대 발전원 자리에 올랐습니다.
The times they are a-changing. It's the first time in 17 years that coal has been displaced as number one, the leading energy source. And it is nuclear power. It accounted for 31.7% of the total electricity generation last year. Coal and gas were tied for second place.
Yeah.
And renewable energy, for the first time ever, was at 10.6%, surpassing the 10% of energy for the first time. So we're seeing lots of changes. I have a feeling that renewable energy will be going up and up and up the list as time goes by, and coal and gas will be reduced.
Absolutely. So in first place we have 원자력, which in English is nuclear power. In second place, joint second place, you said coal and gas.
Yes, that's right.
석탄과 가스가 우리나라 발전원 공동 2위네요.
Yeah, and not gasoline, we should be saying. We're talking about natural gas.
그래요. 그 다음에 renewable energy, 신재생 에너지는 처음으로 10%대를 넘어섰습니다. All right. Well, we're talking about overtaking something.
Vroom vroom, Sue.
What does that mean?
If you're commuting by car or by bus or by taxi this morning, there's a good chance you have overtaken someone or they've overtaken you, which means you go in front of them, you go faster than them, and so you take the place where they were. You become in an extra position forward and they go back.
So nuclear power was in second place.
And now it's in first. It didn't get faster. In this case, it increased its share.
Yeah.
So when we use overtake in terms of figures, yes, it can mean that something has gone faster than the others and faster than it went before, but it could be getting bigger, could be getting more expensive. It could be anything that we measure in terms of size.
Yeah, exactly. 앞지르다 이런 의미가 있죠. So in a race, you would say someone is overtaking the person in front of them.
Exactly, yes. You don't undertake, though, because if you're an undertaker, you're taking care of the deceased.
That's a completely different word.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what about electricity generation?
Yes. So generation, the noun form of generate. So a generation, or like electricity generation, is the making of electricity. So generation is the making of something. I think one of the biggest forms of generation we have these days is generative AI. We can talk about image generation or text generation, script generation, all these things, meaning those things are being made.
그래요. 생성형 AI를 영어로는 generative AI라고 하고요. 여기서는 전기 발전, 그러니까 발전원을 얘기하고 있는 건데 electricity generation이라고 표현을 해서 이 generation이 뭔가 발생하는 것을 얘기하고 있죠.
Yeah, not to be confused with the different generations, whether you're Generation X or from the millennial generation or the Gen Z or Gen A or whatever you may be.
That's the same spelling,
Yes.
but it's a different meaning.
Exactly. So don't get confused with that. When we're talking about your age and what group you're in, that's your generation. But here we're talking about making things.
그래요. 이 세대라는 뜻과 혼동되지 않도록 주의하시면 되겠습니다. 다시 한번 제가 헤드라인 읽어볼까요? Nuclear power overtook coal last year to become Korea's largest source of electricity for the first time, accounting for more than 31% of total electricity generation. Let's move on to the next headline.
Over 200 people aged over 100 are receiving national pension benefits this year, with the oldest beneficiary being 111 years old, according to government data.
정부 자료에 따르면 올해 100세 이상 국민연금 수급자 수가 200명을 넘어섰으며 이 중 최고령 수급자는 111세인 것으로 나타났습니다.
Congratulations to all of them. These are the figures that stood at January from the National Pension Service, and it is incredible.
Yeah.
138 women and 63 men, all over 100 years old. And what's incredible, because I think life expectancy is always something that's talked about. In 2010, when we looked at the number of people who were over 100, it was just 13.
Yeah.
And now, in 2025, we've gone past 200. So it's quite incredible. it's astonishing that we have these wonderful people receiving their pensions, and all of the centenarian pension recipients are getting their survivors' pensions, which meaning they're getting those monthly payments that would have been provided to their spouse or their child or the others.
Right. All in all, the number of people receiving these pension benefits surpass 7 million, I believe. But the people over the age of 100 account for about 200. Out of those, I believe there are more women than men.
Oh, it's almost double. Yeah. And to be honest, when you look at life expectancies all over the world, that's often the case. Women live longer than men.
All right. Well, what is the word benefit here? How is it used?
I hope that you get a benefit from me explaining this to you. Meaning you get some advantage, you get something good from it.
Yes.
When we're talking about government policies, very often it's financial.
Yeah.
So usually when we're talking about benefits, it's a financial benefit. You're getting some kind of monetary compensation or monetary reward. That said, you can get an emotional benefit, an intellectual benefit, all sorts of benefits, but often in the news it'll be financial.
그래요. benefit라는 게 이득이나 혜택이라는 의미도 있지만 여기서는 경제적인 의미를 가지고 있어서 연금 수당이라는 의미로 쓰인 겁니다. 그래서 National Pension Benefits 수당이라고 해석을 하면 되겠고 때에 따라서는 회사의 복지 혜택이라는 의미도 있을 수 있죠. What are the benefits your company has to offer? 이렇게 얘기했을 때
Yeah, health benefits, vacation benefits.
그런 거요. 네, 그냥 이제 단순히 그 이득을 말하는 게 아니라
네.
내가 실제로 받을 수 있는 그런 이제 복지 혜택들을 묻는 경우에도 benefit라는 단어를 씁니다. All right, and what about beneficiary?
Well, if you're a beneficiary, you're getting a benefit,
Yes.
whatever it may be. So the word beneficiary refers to someone who's receiving whatever benefit you're talking about.
Exactly. 자, 수혜자, 수령인, beneficiary. Could you give us the spelling for this long word?
Absolutely. B-E-N-E-F-I-C-I-A-R-Y. Beneficiary.
All right. Well, here's the headline again. Over 200 people aged over 100 are receiving national pension benefits this year, with the oldest beneficiary being 111 years old, according to government data.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has challenged Russian President Vladimir Putin to meet in person for peace talks in Istanbul on Thursday, after Putin rejected a demand for a 30-day ceasefire and instead said Russia was ready for direct negotiations.
블라디미르 젤렌스키 우크라이나 대통령은 블라디미르 푸틴 러시아 대통령이 30일간의 휴전안을 거부하는 대신 직접 협상을 거론하자 이를 받아 목요일에 튀르키예 이스탄불에서 직접 만나 평화회담을 할 것을 요구했습니다. So in Korean, we ended that whole phrase with 요구했습니다, which is to request.
Yes.
But in English, the verb used is to challenge.
Yeah.
And so there's a slight connotation difference with the Korean and English there.
There is, but they're at war.
Yeah,
And it is combative. And especially, I think, over the last month or two, we saw Volodymyr Zelensky have a very rough meeting with Trump and J.D.
Yes.
Vance. And then at the Pope's funeral, we had that iconic picture of Trump and Zelensky huddled over in the middle of a room on those two chairs. And now we have, possibly for the first time since fighting began, a meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin.
That's right. And President Trump did have something to do with it, I believe. Tell us more.
Yes, so the Ukrainian president is saying that they need a ceasefire. And they have to have a ceasefire. And Trump has been calling for a ceasefire. That demand was set out on Saturday. And it feels like the pressure is on. And so Putin, he had an unusual sort of response. The response came at 2 a.m. In a statement read out to journalists, where he was accusing Ukraine of breaking previous ceasefires. But despite that, he said that we should meet for talks that could take place this week on Thursday in Turkey, in Istanbul. It's hard to know what's going on. There's a lot of power play that's been happening over the past few years as the conflict has continued. Everybody wants peace. The question is, on whose terms?
그래요. 자, 그러니까 지난 주말에 일단은 EU 국가들과 블라디미르 젤렌스키 우크라이나 대통령이 함께 푸틴 대통령에게 30일간의 ceasefire, 휴전을 제안했습니다.
네.
받아들이지 않았고요. 푸틴 대통령이 대신에 난 직접 만나서 이런 얘기 할 거면 직접 만나자 이런 얘기를 했습니다. 그러자 우크라이나 대통령이 그러자 받아들인 거죠. 이게 영어식으로는 challenge라고 표현을 했는데 우크라이나 대통령이 내놓은 이 도전장을 받아들이면서 어떻게 보면 또 다른 도전장을 내놓은 겁니다. 그렇게 만나고 싶으면 나는 이번 주 목요일 날 이스탄불에서 만나겠다 이렇게 얘기를 한 거고요. 그 사이에는 이제 미국 트럼프 대통령이 둘이 당장 만나라 하는 그런 이제 얘기들도 좀 했습니다. 그래서 약간의 역할이 있지 않았느냐 그런 얘기들도 있죠.
Yeah, but we'll have to wait and see. This could mean the start of lasting peace, or it could end in disaster. I think the world will be waiting with bated breath on Thursday.
그래요. 그러니까 어떻게 보면은 푸틴 대통령이 나는 직접 만나고 싶어라고 했을 때 우크라이나 대통령이 노라고 말할 것까지 감안했을 수도 있는데 블라디미르 젤렌스키 대통령은 좋아 이렇게 받아들인 거죠. So he said, yeah, I want to meet in person. What does that mean?
Well, we meet in person every Tuesday, Sue.
We do.
We end up in the same studio, in the same room. I'm not doing it over the internet. I'm not a face on a screen. We're face to face, literally. So if you meet in person, you're meeting offline. You're meeting in real life. You're in the same room with each other.
그래요. Meet in person or to meet personally. That's the expression I think they actually used. 직접 만나다. So if you meet online or if you meet virtually, 컴퓨터 화면상으로 만나는 거고요. What about instead you do something?
Exactly. If you do something instead, that means you're not doing the thing that that people maybe thought you were going to do or people were expecting you to do. Instead, you do something else. So in this case, it was a case of rejecting the ceasefire. So they wanted him to accept the ceasefire. Instead of that, he did something else, and that's what he did was said Russia was ready for direct negotiations.
So instead would be 대신에 in Korean. 이 경우에는 이 30일간의 휴전 대신 직접 만나는 거는 할 수 있다.
네.
라고 푸틴 대통령이 얘기를 한 거죠. So Putin rejected this demand for a 30-day ceasefire and instead said, I'd like to meet in person.
Yeah.
And Zelensky said, okay, let's do it.
Well, you explained that instead of me.
I explained it instead of you. Yeah, exactly. So I think it'll happen this Thursday. It's only a few days away.
It does seem like it will take place. But the question is what happens during this meeting?
Yeah, that's right. All right, here's the headline again. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has challenged Russian President Vladimir Putin to meet in person for peace talks in Istanbul on Thursday, after Putin rejected a demand for a 30-day ceasefire and instead said Russia was ready for direct negotiations.
Do you want to read the next headline instead of... No, not instead of me. I should
you read it instead of me? Yes, please.
Spanish authorities have told more than 160,000 people near Barcelona to stay indoors after a fire at an industrial warehouse containing pool cleaning products released a toxic cloud of chlorine over a wide area.
스페인 카탈루냐 지방에서 수영장 청소용품 보관 창고에 화재가 발생해 유독한 염소가스 연기가 넓은 지역에 확산되자 당국이 바르셀로나 인근 주민 약 16만 명에게 자택에 머무르라는 외출 금지령을 내렸습니다. Tell us more.
It's a very scary situation, and so Spain's Civil Protection Service told everyone, keep your doors closed, keep your windows closed within that area. They closed off the roads for 5 local districts across the coast. They shut down train stations so that nobody was going to be getting in, nobody would be trying to get out. They wanted everyone to remain in place because chlorine, this toxic chemical, can be very, very dangerous.
Yeah, it can.
One person, the warehouse owner, he talked to a radio station and said, it's very difficult for chlorine to catch on fire, but when it does, it's very hard to put out. So there was a risk. If people were out and about, if there was a spark, if there was a naked flame, then there could have been a disaster. And so they shut down the whole area, got 160,000 people to stay indoors.
What is staying indoors?
It's when you don't go out. Indoors and outdoors. Indoors is when you're inside a building. Outdoors is when you're outside the building. So sometimes we get weather advisories. When the pollution is bad, they recommend that children, the vulnerable and the elderly stay indoors, meaning don't go out.
stay가 머무르다라는 뜻인데 stay indoors, 집 안에 머물러라라는 얘기겠죠. So this order or this recommendation was made. 우린 말로는 이제 외출 금지령이 내려졌다.
네.
이렇게 해석을 하고 있습니다. The reason is because of the toxic chlorine.
Yes, toxic, a song by Britney Spears, but also meaning something that is dangerous or poisonous or is going to cause us some kind of harm. It's not good for us at all. So if you see the word toxic on a bottle, you do not want to touch it or consume it or do anything with it. You should be very, very careful. If a person is toxic, that means they can cause harm to others, not necessarily through violence, but maybe through their actions, through their words, through their behavior.
That's what Britney Spears was talking about, a
She
toxic
was.
relationship I think, with a previous boyfriend.
And the opposite, a very good word to know if you've got kids, is non-toxic, non-toxic. If you see that on a toy or on clay or something like that, it means if your child licks it or puts it in their mouth, it's not going to be dangerous. They shouldn't eat it, but it's not going to harm them.
Exactly. So you always want to go for those non-toxic toys.
Yes.
Obviously. And I think toys should just be non-toxic in general.
Well, I think in our childhood, you did have to watch out a little bit.
Yeah.
But certainly nowadays in Korea, I hope all toys available are non-toxic.
Indeed. Toxic, toxic. 독성이 들어있다라는 뜻입니다. 유독성이죠. So toxic chemicals, 유독성 화학 물질이 되겠고. In this case, we're talking about chlorine, but it could be anything. 또 사람한테도 쓴다고 아까 표현해 주셨는데.
Exactly. The most common word I think associated with it would be waste.
Yeah,
toxic waste. Which needs to be disposed of properly.
네, 독성 폐기물이 되겠고요. 사람이나 관계에 관해서 톡식이라고 하면은 정말 안 좋은 관계를 얘기합니다.
네.
이 사람이랑 같이 있으면은 나한테 또 안 좋은 영향이 많이 오고 그럴 때 이제 this person is toxic or this relationship is toxic.
Yeah, or that's a toxic friend.
That's not a good friend at all. 그래요. It's as if you're being poisoned by them, isn't it?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah,
It's a horrible thing, a horrible word to use, so be very careful if you're using it about people. But certainly, if a substance is toxic, stay away.
That's right. Well, here's the headline again. Spanish authorities have told more than 160,000 people near Barcelona to stay indoors after a fire at an industrial warehouse containing pool cleaning products released a toxic cloud of chlorine over a wide area. All right, let's move on to the final headline.
China has revised its marriage rules to simplify paperwork, eliminating the need for household registration books, allowing couples to register at any eligible registry nationwide, and requiring only ID cards and a declaration that they are unmarried and not closely related.
중국이 혼인신고 규정을 개정해 서류 절차를 간소화했습니다. 이에 따르면 부부는 호적 등록 위치와 상관없이 중국 어디서나 적법한 시설에서 혼인신고를 할 수 있으며 신분증을 제시한 다음 미혼인 점과 친족이 아닌 점을 명시한 선언문에 서명만 하면 신고 절차가 완료됩니다. It's getting easier to make your marriage official, I guess.
Yeah, I wish it was like that when I got married. It was,
Was it very
lots of
complicated?
paperwork,
Oh,
yes.
I see.
But the good news is in China, and even for multicultural couples, it's getting much easier. So in the past, they've had to use this household registration book. That was necessary for your application. Now all they need is their ID cards, and they have to sign a declaration to say that we're not married to anyone else, and we're not closely related by blood within 3 generations. And the great thing is you can register anywhere. It doesn't matter where your household registration is. You can marry anywhere in the country. And if your partner is not Chinese or is a resident of Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, or another overseas Chinese community, you can also get married much more easily. So it's lifting a burden in terms of paperwork and making things easier to get official.
What is paperwork?
Oh, Sue. Why did you have to ask?
Is it just paper?
Well, it's paper that you have to work on. It's documents that you have to prepare. If we're talking about an office situation, your paperwork is the forms you have to fill in or the documents you have to make. A lot of it's electronic nowadays, but we used to have big piles of paper on our desks.
Yeah.
So when you apply for a passport, when you apply for a visa, for a marriage application, you need to prepare a certain set of documents.
Yeah.
And that's the paperwork.
서류 절차를 paperwork라고 하고요. 그걸 간소화하는 게 simplify. So now in China, the paperwork has been simplified.
Yeah, you just need your ID and a signed declaration.
그래요. 기존에는 호적 위치, 그 호적지에서만 혼인신고를 할 수 있었는데 이제는 어디서든 할 수 있게 되니까 아주 심플해진 거죠. So they eliminated the need for what we talked about before.
Yeah, and if you eliminate something, you get rid of it. You destroy it or you make it disappear. So here, they're getting rid of the need for these books. And they're making them obsolete.
Yes. Elimination 그러면은 이제 그 탈락하는 거잖아요. 그래서 eliminate라는 게 없애다. The need for something, 무언가의 필요성을.
Yeah. And if you're a fan of game shows, like these days, we've got all sorts of different game shows where you compete. Every week a contestant gets eliminated.
That's right. 그런 의미의 탈락을 제가 얘기한 거였고요. 여기서는 eliminating the need for household registration books. 이제는 이 호적지에서만 혼인신고를 해야 할 그런 필요성이 없어진 겁니다. Alright, well, here's the headline one more time. China has revised its marriage rules to simplify paperwork, eliminating the need for household registration books, allowing couples to register at any eligible registry nationwide, and requiring only ID cards and a declaration that they are unmarried and not closely related. Well, that's it for our headlines with Paul Matthews this morning.
The average daily bus ridership in Seoul has declined by 19% over the past decade, with the steepest drop seen in small buses operating shorter community shuttle routes, according to official city data.
서울시 공식 자료에 따르면 시내버스를 이용하는 서울 시민 수가 10년 새 19%가량 줄어든 가운데 상대적으로 짧은 노선을 오가는 마을버스가 그중 가장 큰 폭의 감소세를 보였습니다. Tell us more.
Yeah, so these shorter, I guess, community shuttle routes, they're the maul buses here in Seoul, and they're, I guess, they're not in operate or they're not being used as frequently as before. Right. So they're saying that the public buses here in Seoul, they're carrying far fewer passengers than a decade ago, and of course, the city is footing the bill. So they're saying that daily ridership has dropped 19% since 2014, with these smaller maul buses or the community shuttle buses seeing an even steeper 33% decline. And to keep these services running, Seoul has spent nearly 2.5 trillion won or 1.75 billion US dollars in subsidies from 2021 to 2024 under its semi-public transit model. They're saying that subway use is on the rise with more people skipping these buses due to irregular schedules, rising car ownership, and personal mobility options like e-scooters. Despite the decline, the bus numbers haven't shrunk. In fact, there are now more buses than experts recommend, and most routes run at a loss. But route licenses are protected under law, making them hard to cut. So some private equity-owned bus firms have drawn dividends even while receiving public subsidies. So they're prompting Seoul to tighten oversight and reform funding rules. And the city is hoping to cut costs without reducing services to those who depend on it most, like me, because we live up on a hill and it takes us it's a bit of a walk to get down to the main station, the subway station. So our maul bus or our community shuttle bus is very, very popular. So we hope that these cuts or these tightening of oversight won't affect us, but I'm sure there are a lot of these maul buses that are running empty. So, I think they need to take a closer look and see which ones are really popular and may need expansion because for us, I think there are some buses that actually do need expansion.
I mean, the supply does reflect the demand, and hopefully more and more people in your apartment complex will be using the community shuttle buses so they don't go away. All right. What does ridership mean?
Yeah, so ridership, it refers to the number of passengers that are using a particular form of public transportation. So in this case, it refers to the community shuttle buses.
ridership라는 것은요, 승객 수, 그 rider, 라이드 하는 사람이겠죠. 이 경우에는 지금 버스를 이용하는 사람의 수가 되겠습니다. 그렇다면 우리 비슷한 표현으로 청취자 수라고 말하고 싶으면 listenership 하면 되겠고 TV 같은 경우는 시청자 수, viewership 하면 되겠죠. So you might say Morning Special's listenership peaked last month or it hasn't peaked yet 이런 식으로 이제 청취자 수가 어떻다라고 표현을 할 수 있겠어요. Instead of saying the number of people who listened or the number of people who ride the bus, you can just say the ridership. SHIP가 이렇게 붙는 영어 단어들이 참 많은데요. 그중에서 콩글리시도 하나 있죠. 대표적인 거, skinship.
Yes.
이거는 영어에서 쓰진 않는 표현입니다.
They would not understand.
Yeah, I think you would probably just say physical contact or public,
touch,
public displays of affection, something like that.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. 아까 마을버스 얘기하셨을 때 community shuttle bus.
Yes.
라고 하셨어요.
Right.
그렇다면 마을버스 노선은 뭘까요?
A community shuttle bus or community shuttle route or route or route. So a community shuttle or community shuttle bus, it's sort of a flexible public transit mode
Right.
that facilitates passenger transport within a community or between a community and usually a transportation hub. In Seoul, I think it's usually between subway stations and if you're located or if you're like housing complex or if your home is a little bit far away from the subway stations.
Yeah.
A route is a way or course that's taken in getting from a starting point to a certain destination.
Exactly. R-O-U-T-E. I say route, you say route,
Yeah.
and both are perfectly fine. You don't say village bus, though, do you? Like 마을 버스,
Yeah.
village bus. I don't
Yeah.
think that's the expression used in English, but community shuttle bus is a little bit more natural. All right. 그래서 마을 버스 노선, community shuttle route or route. 다시 한번 제가 헤드라인 읽어보겠습니다. The average daily bus ridership in Seoul has declined by 19% over the past decade, with the steepest drop seen in small buses operating shorter community shuttle routes, according to official city data. Here's our next headline.
South Korean conductor Jung Myung-hoon will become the first Asian to serve as music director of the famed Italian opera house Teatro alla Scala.
지휘자 정명훈이 동양인으로는 최초로 세계적 권위의 오페라 극장인 이탈리아 밀라노 라스칼라 극장 차기 음악 감독에 선임됐습니다. Wow, tell us more.
Yes, this is wonderful news from coming from Italy, I guess. So he's been named the next music director of Italy's renowned Teatro alla Scala. The Milan Opera House announced that Chung will take over from Riccardo Cialli at the end of 2025 and serve through February 2030. And as we mentioned, he will be the first Asian to hold the post in La Scala's history. Wow. Chung actually has a long-standing relationship with the Opera House, having led 84 performances of 9 operas and 141 concerts since 1989. That's actually more than any non-director conductor. And his appointment was unanimously approved by La Scala's board following a proposal by its superintendent and artistic director, Fortunato Ortombina.
Wow, I understand the history of this theatre is roughly 250 years or so. So for the first time in almost 250 years, we're
Yes.
seeing an Asian music director.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's wonderful news and a source of joy for, I
Yeah.
guess, Koreans. A source of joy and pride. Yes.
그래요. 특히 성악가들에게는 꿈의 무대라고 이렇게 불린다고 합니다. 자, serve as something. So
Right.
Jung Myung-hoon is going to serve as music director.
Right. Another way to say this is act as, and it means to perform duties or services for some sort of organization, or you can also do this for another person as well.
Right. 자, 어떤 역할을 하다. Serve as something. And Jung Myung-hoon will be serving as music director until 2030. And this opera house is a famed opera house.
Right. It's just another way to say it's famous or renowned. So it means that it's known about or it's known by many people.
Right. So we could just say the famous Italian opera house, Teatro alla Scala.
Yep.
But in this case, FAMED, the famed Italian opera house, Teatro alla Scala. 그래서 아주 유명한이라는 뜻이 되겠습니다.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to read the headline again. South Korean conductor Jung Myung-hoon will become the first Asian to serve as music director of the famed Italian opera house, Teatro alla Scala.
Microsoft Skype, once synonymous with internet-based voice and video calling, has officially shut down, bringing an end to its 22-year tenure.
한때 인터넷 음성 및 화상 통화의 대명사였던 마이크로소프트의 스카이프가 22년 만에 서비스를 공식 종료했습니다. Oh, okay.
Yeah, goodbye Skype. So the service has officially shut down, ending a 22-year run as a pioneer in internet calling. It was first acquired by Microsoft for $8.5 billion back in 2011, and it once boasted over 300 million monthly users and revolutionized global communication with free voice and video calls. But in recent years, its user base has dwindled down to just 36 million as, of course, rivals like Zoom, there's WhatsApp, and Microsoft Teams surged ahead. They say that Teams now has over 320 million users, and Microsoft is shifting focus there, especially to integrate more AI features. But Skype has helped popularize the VoLP and even showcased early real-time translation tech, but it struggled with clunky updates, reliability issues, and failure to evolve. You got to move on with the times.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so they say that Skype users had until May 5th to migrate to Teams or to switch services. And while the app is gone, its influence, I believe, on digital communication still lives on.
Yeah, and it'll always be there in history. We'll
Yep.
learn about it.
Yep.
Skype was once synonymous with internet-based voice calling and video calling. Now, let's talk about this expression.
Yes, synonymous. Right. If you're synonymous with something, it means that you're so closely associated with another thing that if you think of one thing, it suggests the other, and the two are essentially the same.
그래서 동의어를 synonym이라고 하고 그다음에 반의어는 antonym이라고 하죠. synonym의 스펠링은 SYNONYM인가요?
Yes.
I don't know why I set myself up for these things.
It's like a spelling bee.
그러게요. 자, 그리고 antonym은 ANTONYM 이렇게 쓰는데 동의어, 반의어. 여기서 synonymous라는 것은 뭐뭐과 같다. synonymous with something. 그래서 스카이프는 한때 일것과 동일시됐다. 뭐냐면은 인터넷에서 하는 화상 채팅, 아니면 영상 채팅, 이런 것들과 그냥 동일시되는 그런 대명사였죠.
Yeah. Nowadays, when we think of online chatting or speaking or having meetings, online meetings, we think of Zoom. But back in the day, it was Skype.
Skype. Yeah, absolutely. 그래요. 근데 우리는 이제 뭐뭐의 대명사다라고 하지만 영어에서는 Skype was the pronoun 이렇게 하지 않아요. 하지 않아요. 그러니까 이때는 직역하지 마시고 it was synonymous with internet video calling 이렇게 하시면 되겠고. Tenure, what's that?
A tenure. So we use this a lot when, for example, the president's tenure in office is so-and-so years. So it refers to someone holding an office, or it can also refer to the conditions under which land or buildings are held or occupied.
재임 기간, 그것을 TENURE, tenure라고 하는데요. It can be for a job, a position, a role, anything. So that's the period of time that you hold that role.
Yep.
In this case, it's not a person, but it's Skype.
Skype, yeah.
Skype was around for 22 years. That was its tenure. And now it's saying goodbye.
It's gone.
It's, yeah. Chucked out the window. All right. Well, here it is again. Microsoft's Skype, once synonymous with internet-based voice and video calling, has officially shut down, bringing an end to its 22-year tenure. Let's move on to the next headline.
A swirling 30-meter column of dust, known as a dust devil, made a rare appearance in a major UK city, bringing traffic to a standstill and startling bystanders.
영국 맨체스터에서 30m 높이로 회오리치는 보기 드문 먼지바람, 일명 dust devil 현상이 발생해 교통이 멈추고 행인들이 놀라는 일이 있었습니다. Wow, so it's described as a column of dust. 거의 먼지 기둥 같은 거네요.
Yeah. So I think we've talked about the column of water in the ocean, but this is something similar that happens on land. So it was a very dramatic event that sent jaws dropping in Manchester over the weekend as the swirling column of dust tore down a very busy road at that. So it made the traffic stop and it definitely stunned a lot of bystanders. It was 30 meters high, and it was caught on camera spinning down this very busy street with a lot of shocked witnesses saying that it looks like a tornado in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
So witnesses say that they initially thought it was an explosion before they started filming this rare phenomenon, and others say that that it was dark because the dust blocked the sun.
Oh, wow.
But it's not a tornado. It's actually called a dust devil. It's a very short-lived weather event that's caused by warm, dry ground and temperature irregularities. And unlike tornadoes, dust devils rise from the ground and they don't require storm clouds. And they're actually pretty common in desert regions, but of course it's a very rare sight to be seen in the UK. So it was I don't know what I would say if I saw this kind of tearing down the street in the middle of the city. So it was a very surprising show for Manchester locals.
You can tell even by the name that people put to this phenomenon, a dust devil, that it's not something you get to see every day, and it's also quite frightening. Well, this was a really high column of dust. In some articles, it says it was a 30-foot column, which would be 10 meters, but nonetheless, it was very, very tall. And it was a rare appearance, wasn't it?
A very rare appearance. So if it's rare, it means that it just does not happen very often. So it's uncommon or very unusual.
그래요. 자, 드물게 모습을 드러낼 때 make a rare appearance라고 얘기를 합니다. You could say, this singer doesn't make many appearances on stage.
Right.
They don't come on television that often. So they made a rare appearance last weekend on this show, and that would be an example. So it's something that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
What about bring something to a standstill?
Right. So if something brings something to a standstill, or if something is brought to a standstill, it means that it's stopped. Everything has stopped from moving or functioning, usually completely. So it implies a complete halt or a stop of activity or any sort of progress.
그렇죠. 뭔가를 완전히 정지시킨다라는 뜻입니다. Bring something to a standstill. So for example, heavy snow can bring a whole city to a standstill because you can't drive, you can't go out if there's a lot of snow. And I guess that's the same for heavy rain. If it rains too much, then that could also bring traffic to a standstill.
Right, or a major accident during the morning rush hour could bring traffic to a standstill.
Many, many years ago, I was driving on the highway, coming to work, and, the traffic all of a sudden stopped and we were just stuck there not knowing what was going on. And it later turned out there was this food waste truck.
Oh dear.
That had sort of let its waste drop on the floor. The truck itself was okay, but I guess the back part of it tilted. And then you had
all the food waste.
The food waste everywhere on the highway.
Oh,
and it was a lot of food waste.
Yeah.
So it took them some time and that brought traffic to a standstill. But luckily no one was hurt or anything like that. I guess it was a little bit stinky though.
Oh dear.
But, I'm grateful for all the people that do the cleanup operations.
Yes.
When that happens. All right, well, here's the headline again. A swirling 30-meter column of dust known as a dust devil made a rare appearance in a major UK city, bringing traffic to a standstill and startling bystanders. Let's move on to the final headline.
A large-scale study has found that becoming obese under the age of 30 increases the chances of premature death from many chronic diseases by more than 75%.
30세 이전에 비만이 될 경우 여러 만성 질환으로 인한 조기 사망 가능성이 75% 이상 높아진다는 대규모 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. Tell us more.
Well, first of all, what do you need to do about this? So what if you're over the age of 30?
Right.
And what if you were obese before 30? They didn't tell you what you need to do
It's too
afterwards.
late, I guess,
it's too
for us.
late. But so this is a major Swedish study, and it found that becoming obese before the age of 30, it increases the risk of you dying early by over 75%, with the danger especially high for heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and cancer. So they tracked 620,000 adults and found that women who became obese in their 20s were 84% more likely to die prematurely, while the risk for men rose by 79%. And they say that each half kilogram of weight gained before the age of 30 increased your mortality risk by over 20% compared to smaller effects in later decades. And experts say that long-term exposure to excess weight is key to chronic disease, and they are urging governments to act.
So as you said, this news is really for the younger people out there. And if you
you're
have
under
children
30, yes.
or if you have friends, relatives under the age of 30, this could be a bit of advice you could give to them. For those of us over that age, we're just going to have to be very careful about what we
What can we
eat
do?
and try to be as healthy as we can. Okay, if you do something prematurely, or in this case, what is a premature death?
Premature means it occurs or is done before the usual or proper time. So it just means too early.
Right. 원래 예정되거나 예상됐던 것보다 너무나 일찍 뭔가가 일어났을 때 it's premature라고 얘기할 수 있어요. 그래서 그 too early의 느낌이 있습니다. 일찍 해서 좋은 게 아니라 이렇게 일찍 하면 안 됐었는데 뭐 예를 들자면은 아직 경기가 끝나지 않았는데 다 이제 축하 분위기로 갔어요. 그래서 oh no, the football match hasn't ended yet, but the celebration it seems a little premature.
Because you don't know.
그러니까요. 지금 결과가 다 뒤집어질 수도 있는데 벌써 축하하면 어떡해. 너무 이르다. 이런 느낌이 있는 거고. In this case, it's a bit of a morbid story, but you know, we're talking about a death that occurs too early, a premature death.
But the stats really were kind of surprising though, because 75%, and for women they were saying that it was 84%. That's quite high.
That is very high. Well, you don't want to suffer from any sort of chronic disease. But what is a chronic disease?
A chronic disease is, they're talking about conditions that last for a year or more and require ongoing medical attention, or it might be something that limits your daily activities, or it could be both.
Yeah. The point is that it's long-lasting,
Yes.
isn't it? 오래가는 이 만성병을 chronic disease라고 합니다. Sometimes you have pain that's been there for ages, you know, for maybe years.
Like shoulder
you know.
pain,
yeah.
neck pain.
That's a
It's
chronic pain.
Yeah.
그래요. CHRONIC, chronic, 만성이다. 만성병, chronic disease. 다시 한번 제가 읽어보겠습니다. A large-scale study has found that becoming obese under the age of 30 increases the chances of premature death from many chronic diseases by more than 75%. Well, that's it for the headlines with Karen.
The Korea Development Institute has halved its 2025 growth forecast for the domestic economy to 0.8%, citing a slowdown driven by growing trade uncertainties and sluggish exports.
한국개발연구원 KDI가 올해 우리나라 경제 성장률을 종전 발표치의 절반 수준인 0.8%로 전망했습니다. 이는 무역 환경의 불확실성 증가, 그리고 수출 부진으로 인한 경기 둔화를 반영한 것이라는 설명입니다.
Yeah, so the economic think tank, KDI, back in February, projected the country's economy to expand this year by 1.6%, but now they've downgraded that down to 0.8%. So that's half a percentage half the percentage point
Yeah.
of its original forecast back in February. And there are a number of reasons, so like the headline suggests, growing trade uncertainties with, of course, tariffs
Yeah.
being a big theme in the news as of late. And also exports, especially for exports in Korea, very important for the economy. KDI is forecasting total export growth this year of just 0.3%, with the exception of semiconductors. I think for the most part, exports are going to go down. But next year, it's a little bit brighter. KDI expects economic growth to rebound to about 1.6%. And the reason for that is interest rate cuts, increased private consumption, and more construction orders are factors to the recovery. But of course, there's also always a lot of uncertainty externally.
Yeah. Now, when you say something has been halved, what does that mean?
Yeah, so the word half, we know, is when you slice something into two equal parts. When you do it in verb form, to have something, you're dividing it into equal parts or reducing something by half.
Yeah. Could you give us the spelling for this word?
Of course, it's Halve. The L is silent, so
Yeah.
you would just say to have something. You don't have to say halve.
No.
For example, in a cooking instruction, they might say have the cherry tomatoes.
The
for
A
example.
is a slightly elongated sound, isn't it?
Slightly more than just the verb have, I think. So have something.
그래요. 반으로 줄이다라는 동사입니다. In American English or Canadian English, it's have. So it's slightly different to have.
Right.
It's not H-A-V-E, but H-A-L-V-E, 반으로 줄이다, have. And in England, we pronounce it very differently.
How do you
We say
pronounce it?
have.
Have.
And again, the very long A in the middle.
Yeah, so I'm checking up in the dictionary. In the dictionary, it's still pronounced have the same way as the verb
Okay.
to have, but
But the context is how you know it, whether it's a have or, to cut into two.
for some reason that extra L in there makes you want to elongate that A for some reason.
Exactly.
But technically the pronunciation's the same.
So the KDI has halved its growth projection for Korea this year. It was 1.6 before, and now it's 0.8%.
Yes.
One of the reasons is because of growing uncertainties.
Yeah, growing uncertainty it's a situation where there's a lack of certainty or knowledge, and that's increasing and expanding. And it's a easy way for news writers or researchers to kind of just say, we don't know what's going to happen,
Right.
but it doesn't look good.
Right. And the word trade is in the headline, of course, so it's not just any sort of uncertainty, but trade, tariffs, trade policies, all of that is encompassed in this word.
Yeah, and a lot of it is outside of Korea's power,
Yeah,
right? And that's
yeah.
the sort of uncertain part of it.
증가하는 불확실성을 growing uncertainties. 자, 다시 한번 제가 헤드라인 읽어볼게요. The Korea Development Institute has halved its 2025 growth forecast for the domestic economy to 0.8%, citing a slowdown driven by growing trade uncertainties and sluggish exports. Now let's move on to the next headline.
The Korea Meteorological Administration has forecast higher than average nationwide temperatures from May to July, attributing the rise to elevated sea surface temperatures.
기상청은 해수면 온도 상승 탓에 올해 전국적으로 5월부터 7월까지 기온이 평년보다 높을 것으로 전망했습니다.
Yeah, so the KMA, the Korea Meteorological Administration. I've always
a
had trouble.
mouthful.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
always had trouble saying that on air on the news, but it's a long word, 7 syllables, I think. Meteorological,
Yeah.
right? Meteorological. They predict a 50% chance that May and July temperatures will be higher than in previous years. So it's a coin flip. For June, it's a 40% chance that it'll be higher. And the reason for this, higher sea surface temperatures in the Indian Ocean are expected to affect Korea, generate this anti-cyclone, creating this high pressure system. And that's the same for July as well. And also, as far as the monsoon season here in Korea, the KMA anticipates heavier rainfall beginning around the end of June, early July, especially like last year.
Exactly. The surface of anything sort of means the outer layer of it. So
Yep.
in this case, the sea surface would be 해수면, sea surface temperatures, 해수면 온도. Yeah, that's also in the headline there, but it's rising. It's been elevated. It's
Yes.
the term used here.
Right. If something's elevated, it's sort of placed or situated higher
Yeah.
than the surrounding area. For instance, an elevated highway would be sort of an overpass. It's higher than the ground level.
Sure.
You can say.
And an elevator
Of course.
takes you up.
Absolutely.
Although it also takes you down.
Right.
But the actual word to elevate only means to go up.
But you wouldn't call it a de-elevator?
No.
you don't. Or a de-escalator,
Right,
perhaps?
right.
No.
Yeah.
But to elevate, you can elevate someone's spirits as well, to cheer somebody up, right?
yeah.
So
Our spirits are elevated because you're here this morning.
Yeah, okay, sure. Nice. Levitation is when you lift up off the ground there. Right?
Yeah. Dua Lipa, I think, has a song called that,
Yeah.
Levitation. Elevated, 올라간, 높아진이라는 뜻입니다.
Yeah, and also here the KMA attributes something to something,
Yeah.
right? So when you attribute something, for instance, A to B, you're saying that A is caused by or the result of B, right?
그렇죠. A를 B의 탓으로 돌렸다. A가 B 때문에 일어났다라고 할 때 attribute A to B.
Yeah.
In this case, it says the current situation with the higher than average temperatures nationwide has been attributed to the elevated sea surface temperatures.
Exactly. So that is the cause of that.
그래요. 다시 한번 읽어볼까요? The Korea Meteorological Administration, has forecast higher than average nationwide temperatures from May to July, attributing the rise to elevated sea surface temperatures.
I told you it was a mouthful, huh?
It's difficult, yeah. KMA.
Yes.
Or sometimes we just say the National Weather Agency.
Sure.
And
Weather
that's fine.
officials.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
A dilapidated industrial site in the Czech Republic where German businessman Oskar Schindler saved 1,200 Jews during World War II has been transformed into the Museum of Survivors, dedicated to the Holocaust and Jewish history in the region.
제2차 세계대전 당시 독일인 사업가 오스카 쉰들러가 유대인 1,200명을 구해냈던 체코의 낡은 공장이 일명 생존자 박물관으로 새롭게 개관해 이 지역 홀로코스트 및 유대인 역사를 기리게 됐습니다.
Yeah, so this, of course, we were just talking about the movie Schindler's
Yeah.
List. This is based, or Schindler's List was based off of the life of Oskar Schindler, a
Right.
Nazi member. And this textile factory that he owned has been turned into this museum. It was stolen by the Nazis from its Jewish owners back in 1938 and later turned into a concentration camp. But the opening of this museum coincides with the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II this year. You remember from the movie that he was given a ring because he saved a lot of Jews because he employed them, right, in his factory. And that's what the movie was based on. But this museum, another dedication to sort of the memory of the Holocaust, which is a very dark point in civilization, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. The industrial site has been described here as being dilapidated.
Yeah, so of course it's very old. It's decayed, it's deteriorated, sort of fallen into ruin, and that's how we describe something as dilapidated.
다 허물어져가는 굉장히 파손이 많이 된 dilapidated, D-I-L-A-P-I-D-A-T-E-D, dilapidated. And this museum is dedicated to the Holocaust and Jewish history.
Yeah, so when you commit something for a certain purpose or a cause, or if it's intended for a specific use, it's dedicated to something. So oftentimes you'll see a little dedication or a memorial in front of a building or a monument to remember somebody or something.
If you open a book, oftentimes near the front, it'll say dedicated to my wife or my child or my parents or something.
A lot of time movies are dedicated to people as well. The director will put up a little graphic. This movie is dedicated to the life of blank.
Exactly.
Right.
누구에게 바칩니다. This is dedicated to 누구누구. Okay, well, here's the headline one more time. A dilapidated industrial site in the Czech Republic where German businessman Oskar Schindler saved 1,200 Jews during World War II, has been transformed into the Museum of Survivors, dedicated to the Holocaust and Jewish history in the region. 네, 참고로 홀로코스트는 그 유대인 학살을 얘기하죠. Let's move on to the next headline.
New research warns that the climate crisis is threatening the future of bananas, the world's most popular fruit, with nearly 2/3 of banana growing areas in Latin America and the Caribbean at risk of becoming unsuitable for cultivation by 2080.
기후위기로 인해 세계에서 가장 많이 소비되는 과일인 바나나의 미래가 위협받고 있다는 연구 결과가 나왔습니다. 이에 따르면 중남미와 카리브해 국가에 위치한 바나나 재배 면적의 거의 3분의 2가 2080년까지 바나나 재배에 부적합한 땅으로 바뀔 것이라는 관측입니다.
Yeah, so bananas very important for world food and hunger in a way. It's the most consumed fruit. It's the fourth most important food crop globally after wheat, rice, and maize or corn, right? More than 400 million people rely on bananas for between 15 and 27% of their daily calories. So this is really troubling news because a lot of these regions in Latin America and the Caribbean, countries like Guatemala, Costa Rica, Colombia, they yield a lot of this fruit, but rising temperatures, extreme weather, climate-related pests are sort of hitting these areas really hard and devastating these rural communities across the region, according to this new report. So by the year 2080, as the headline suggests, these areas may not be able to cultivate or grow bananas.
Exactly. Do you remember, they used to say bananas were quite rare back in the day, maybe in the 70s, 80s in Korea. And so, just to get one banana was quite a novelty.
Yeah.
But now it looks like we're heading towards that kind of era again.
Yeah, back in my day when I was old, bananas used to cost, right? That's because I think bananas were not able to be grown in Korea. But now, of course, you have greenhouses and sort of local farms, and also the temperature's changing here in Korea as well. But I remember bananas were sort of a luxury.
They
in
were.
a way here.
That's what I heard
Korea.
anyway. Yeah, exactly.
But in a ways, I've heard somewhere that bananas are a real superfood because it has all the nutrients. It's packed with potassium.
Yeah.
Right, and it gives you a lot of energy. I know a lot of marathon runners, athletes in general.
A lot of athletes.
Yeah, when they need a boost of energy, a banana is the perfect food. It's easy to consume. You don't have to you peel it, but it's easy to peel, and that's why a lot of primates like monkeys and apes, I believe, stereotypically love bananas as well.
그러니까요, 굉장히 운동 선수들도 바나나를 좋아하고 또 I know some musicians also love to have a banana or two before their concerts and performances.
Yep.
여러모로 우리가 평소에 운동 선수가 아니더라도 운동할 때도 바나나 먹으면 포만감도 있고 에너지 부스터여서 참 좋은데 그런 바나나를 앞으로 우리가 좀 쉽게 구하지 못할 수도 있겠다. 재배지가 그렇게 줄어들고 있어서 그래서 우려가 되네요. I love bananas too, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do know that if you eat too many bananas in one sitting, it can also cause a little constipation. Right? But in any case, sort of these banana growing areas often referred to as banana plantations, right? And they're specific regions that commercially cultivate bananas. You would call a banana growing area. And they're usually hot tropical climates, warmer temperatures. And so these areas are being affected.
Exactly. 그래서 banana plantation의 또 다른 표현으로 banana growing areas. 바나나 재배 지역.
And that's where the term banana republic comes from. If you know that term. So a banana republic is usually referred to a small country that has a little political instability. It's poorer, it's corrupt, it's badly ruled. And it came up in the early 20th century to refer to countries in South and Central America. That's where we get that term.
I see. Now, if something is unsuitable, what's that?
If something's unsuitable, it's not appropriate, it's not fitting, or it's unacceptable for a certain purpose. To suit someone or something is suited, that means it's the opposite, right? So you have the word suited, but there's also the word suitable. They're both sort of used interchangeably. If you had to make the difference, suited is more of a perfect fit, I would say. Something's very fit for something, but suitable sort of has a broader meaning that something is right or appropriate for a situation.
Exactly. 자, 적합하다, suitable. 적합하지 않다, unsuitable. 여기서 스펠링은요, unsuitable.
Yeah, think of a suit, right? Because it fits perfectly, especially if you make it custom made. There you
그래요.
go.
그다음에 뭐 어울린다라고 할 때도 that suits you.
Yep.
그 옷이 너한테 잘 어울린다.
Yes.
그래요. 다시 한번 읽어보겠습니다. New research warns that the climate crisis is threatening the future of bananas, the world's most popular fruit, with nearly 2/3 of banana growing areas in Latin America and the Caribbean at risk of becoming unsuitable for cultivation by 2080. Now let's move on to our final headline.
Former Uruguayan president Jose Pepe Mujica, known for his modest lifestyle and often called the world's poorest president, has died at the age of 89.
검소한 생활로 유명해 세계에서 가장 가난한 대통령으로 불리기도 했던 호세 페페 무히카 전 우루과이 대통령이 89세를 일기로 별세했습니다.
Yeah, so the former president ruled Uruguay from 2010 to 2015. The exact cause of his death is unknown at this point, but it is known that he suffered from esophageal cancer. But Uruguay, of course, a country in South America, just 3.4 million inhabitants there, but he's one of the few rulers, sort of in a cynical way, that's never been accused of corruption or of undermining his country's democracy like a lot of other countries in the region there as well. Even while he was president, he didn't live in the presidential residence. He just stayed in sort of his modest home on the outskirts of the capital, Montevideo.
Yeah.
And he also drove a sort of dilapidated, if you want to use that word, vehicle, even during his reign and afterwards as well. And he donated a large portion of his salary as president. And that's why he got the moniker or sort of the nickname, the world's poorest president.
그래요. 본명은 호세 무히카인데 페페로 이제 많이 불렸기 때문에 호세 페페 무히카 이렇게 얘기를 했는데 보통 영어에서 이렇게 닉네임을 얘기할 때는 가운데다가 따옴표를 쓰고 quotation marks 안에다가 그 닉네임을 붙이죠. So 호세 페페 in quotation marks 무히카, a very modest president he was indeed.
Yeah, and it's sort of I don't know anything about his policies or his stance on certain issues, but it is sort of a role model in a way for a lot of, global leaders are often thought to be corrupt and sort of their policies have different sort of intentions or purposes, but this is something that maybe a lot of leaders can maybe look up to in terms of really serving the people that elected them.
All right. Tell us what the word modest means.
Yeah, if something is modest, that means it's unassuming in a way. It's moderate. Humble, I think, is probably the best word to describe it.
그렇죠. 굉장히 겸손한 거를 modest라고 얘기할 수 있겠고요. And he's often called this.
Yes, we were talking about Pepe. And so if someone is commonly known as something, it's sort of to introduce that nickname or that description, right? Like Sue, the best teacher at EBS, Choi.
Well,
I made that up.
Thank you, but I don't know what to say. Often called라는 것은 이제 종종 이렇게 불린다라는 의미가 되겠죠.
Right. So it's not an official title, the world's poorest president, but he's often described as that.
네, 맞아요. 그래서 세계에서 가장 가난한 대통령으로 자주 불렸었다. 이게 되겠고요. 또 참고로 왜 근데 사람들이 호세 무히카인데 페페라고 불렀나 제가 잠깐 찾아보니까 스페인어로는 호세를 줄여서 페페라고 많이 한대요.
Yeah.
I guess it's, like the the shortened versions of names in English. We have loads of those like Bob, Robert, Bill, William, but Pepe, Jose.
It's sort of a cute way
Yeah.
to a term of not a term of endearment, but it's just sort of a nickname
Yeah.
that sticks oftentimes. And in Latin America, I know names get very long. Oftentimes they have 4 names because they'll take they have their given name, their family name, but also they take their father's family name as a middle name as well as their mother. So
Yeah.
they'll have 4 names. So they reduce
see.
it like this.
Got it. 자, 다시 한번 제가 읽어보겠습니다. Former Uruguayan President Jose Pepe Mujica, known for his modest lifestyle and often called the world's poorest president, has died at the age of 89. All right, well, that's it for the headlines with Shane.